Okay, now what is that EPG? We'll come into that. Let's first discuss this tenant. Okay, I'm skipping this 2-3 slide and then we'll come back to this 2-3 slide again. Now, what is tenant? Tenant, which we were discussing, right? Tenant represent a unit of isolation from a policy perspective, but it does not represent a private network. Tenant can represent a customer in service provider setting, an organization or a domain in the enterprise setting, or just a convenient group of policy. So what is the meaning of tenant? Tenant is an isolation from a policy perspective. So coming back to our this example, which we are discussing, right? So it means now my E1 by 1, it's in tenant A, VLAN number 10. E1 by 10 is a tenant B into VLAN number 20. Now what is that meaning is that we created a one logical thing which we call as tenant. Okay, now under this tenant we are creating a policy. Now for me the policy right now is a VLAN number 20. Now this is policy for tenant B, right? Similarly, I have another tenant, tenant A, where the policy is VLAN number 10. Right now what we were discussing is like my requirement is on E1 by 1 port, I want VLAN number 20 as well, right? Now VLAN number 20. Now you want under which tenant? Tenant A or under tenant B? So let's suppose you need this VLAN number 20 on a tenant B. So previously your config was policy VLAN 20 was on ETH 1 by 1 by 10, sorry, right? Now you will add this policy on a ETH 1 by 1. Here ETH 1 by 1 has a policy with the VLAN number 10 under tenant A. Okay, so guys, I know maybe you guys don't understand what I'm talking. Let's jump into the lab and then there I'll show you the tenant meaning, because it's not a very big thing. Like tenant is not something which let me show you in the lab, then you will understand more. So what I'm trying to say is like 192.168.1.0.1. Let's log in lab and then I'll show you. So we going into the tenant. So this tenant I created, right? UniNet tenant last time. Let me delete it. Okay. So this 3 tenant, common tenant, management tenant, and infra tenant, these are by default created and you can't remove it. So if let's suppose if I want to delete this tenant, there is no option to delete it, right? Similarly, like for infra, if I want to delete it, I can't delete it. But if I created another tenant, let's suppose test, I'm creating it. So this tenant I can delete it. So there will be a delete option. I will see it. Right. So these 3 tenant are default created. The name is common tenant, management tenant, and infra tenant. Now what is tenant then? It means if you see the common tenant, the name is common. It means whatever the policy I created in this tenant, I will be able to see that policy into the every tenant which is inside this API AP cluster, right? So so if I log into the common tenant, let's suppose, let me see what are the policy is created under this contract. So if I go under the contract, so I'm saying there is a one contract default is created under this common tenant. So if I go under the management, right, and if I go under the contract, standard contract, now basically if I need to go to the application profile, let me do a test. Create EPG. So see this tenant, right? This BD, let me just do it. Then I'll explain you. Okay, application profile. Just don't worry whenever I'm clicking. Okay, so contract. Now if I right click and add a provided contract, right? So add a provided contract. If I do it, I see a default and default contract here, right? Default contract. Does this tenant has any contract? No, right? We went into this contract section and we see there is no contract under this tenant. But if I want to use the contract, I can use the contract. Now from which tenant? If I drag down, it will tell me the common tenant. It means there is a default tenant. There's a default contract which is created in the common tenant. See, contract name is default and that is in the common tenant. So the meaning of the common is like whatever you are creating under this tenant, it will be visible in every other tenant. So that's why the name is common tenant, right? So in the management tenant, whatever I am creating under the management tenant, it will be visible under only in the management tenant. But all the management related tasks, like you want to assign the out of band management to the switch, where you will come under the management. You want to attach to the NTP server, DNS server, all management related stuff will come into the management tenant. Infra tenant, the name itself says infra. It means all the infra related things like the VRF. There is one VRF overlay one which is by default created. The overlay one. Right? So this overlay one is used by which? Is used by ISIs to form the neighborship. So that's why it is in the under the infra tenant. But this overlay one VRF, I won't be able to see it under the management tenant. So if I want to use this VRF, right? Let me create a bridge domain. Test. So under test, I won't be able to see the VRF which is created under the infra. I would be able to see the VRF which is created under the tenant management. So in the management, there are two VRF which is already created, in band and out of band. And these are the two VRF which is from the common tenant. Right? So the tenant, meaning of the tenant is like it's a logical construct. It means whatever the policy you are creating under one tenant will remain in that tenant only until it's a common tenant. Apart from that, tenant is never used in forwarding. It is not used in any way. It's just a logical policy perspective, like isolation from the policy perspective, right? So meaning let's suppose you have a within your organization you have a two departments, right? Now you don't want that team A should see the policy of the team B, so you can create a two tenant. One is tenant A and another is tenant B. So at that time, if you give access to tenant A, the team A will able to see only tenant A policy. They will not able to see the tenant B. But it does not mean they cannot use any the port which tenant B is already used. Meaning, let's suppose tenant B is already used E1x1 port. That does not restrict team A or tenant A to use this E1x1. For tenant A, all the ports are still open. So for a one port, on a single port, you can have many tenants. So tenant is nothing but a logical perspective, right? So I think now it will be more clear to you guys. But if it is not, just let me know. Yeah, so this whole question, Daminda, just give me a few minutes and then we will discuss it, right? So what is this
Port
doing?
will be each port will be each port can be part of multiple tenants, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. So that's why. So let's suppose E1/10 is a part of tenant B. Now you want to use in the tenant A, you can use it. There's no restriction that this port is already used by tenant B. You can't use it. No, you will be able to see all the ports under tenant A and similarly under tenant B. But the
Okay, got
logical,
it.
whatever the
Can,
policy you
so,
applied, yeah.
so
Yes,
can we
Sachin.
use the single VRF in the multiple tenant also?
Single VRF in the multiple tenant until it is a common tenant. So that's why. So if you create a VRF under this tenant B,
Yes.
right? So the same VRF you can use in the tenant A with the same name, right? But that does not mean the routing table remains same. The name can be same, right? So but if you're saying, hey, this VRF can I use in tenant A? No, you can't use it. You can't use it until unless it's a common tenant.
So just suppose we put one interface in the VRF A or VRF B.
Mhm.
So same interface we put on the other VRF or is the same VRF in if just suppose E1/1 is a part of tenant A and tenant B also.
Hmm.
So can the single interface we can use the multiple VRF or a single VRF?
No, you can use the multiple VRF.
So
You can
how
use
can
multiple.
they divide the VRF things in between? Means the
Um,
routing tables.
so actually, yeah, this is a very good question. Basically, um, how they know, how the leaf knows that it has to put into VRF A or VRF B under which tenant, under which thing, right? So um, actually, VRF is combined to something called BD. BD is something that combined to the EPG.
BD is like
Okay.
a IRB, na? Integrated routing and bridging.
No, not exactly that. Coming to that, right? So tenant, I hope it's clear to all of you now that tenant is a logical perspective. It is never used in the forwarding, right? VRF, yes, it's used in the forwarding. BD is used in the forwarding. EPG is used in the forwarding. But tenant meaning is like a logical perspective of the policy. Isolation from a policy perspective, meaning one under one tenant A, you won't be able to see the tenant B configuration and vice versa until unless you are creating the policy under the common tenant. So if you're creating any policy under the common tenant, it will be visible in across all the tenant, right? Now VRF, you all know what is the VRF.
Just suppose
Yeah,
we have one policy on the tenant A and other policy on the tenant B. But both policy is the means 100% difference between us. So how can we call the same policy on the same port?
okay. So now, okay, I know what you are saying. So um, you are saying that on this port, you apply two VRF A, right, and VRF B.
Not a VRF, and just suppose some policies there on a single port
Yeah,
for a tenant one and tenant B,
right,
and the policy are means fully different with each other.
right. Yeah. So actually, yeah. So now see the tenant. Um, what is tenant? I know the answer of this question, but I'm not able to put it
Actually,
into the words. But
multiple term is coming. Let's just suppose tenant, BD, EPG, contact, but
right, right.
nothing is related to each other right now. That's why
No,
I'm saying.
yes, Sachin. So just give me few minutes. I need to explain you VRF, the BD, and the EPG. Then we will come and discuss this question. Then it will be very clear to you what I'm trying to say you, right? Just give me few minutes. Then we will. Okay. So I'm just put your question on a hold for some time, because I need to explain you VRF. So you are saying the policy, but the policy meaning here is VRF, the BD, the EPG, right? So we had to discuss VRF, we had to discuss BD, and we had to discuss EPG. That's why. But once that is clear, what is BD, what is EPG, and what is VRF, this all mess will be clear. Okay. Um, okay. So that's a tenant. VRF. Let me use the tenant. Okay. So in a nutshell, tenant policy is all about this four parameters: tenant, VRF, BD, EPG, and there is a contract as well. Let me put in the contract in a separate contract. Okay, contract is easy to understand because we know ACL, how the ACL works. So, but this BD and EPG are new, and tenant is new for us. So that's why but okay. But anyway, so tenant is a um, um, logical construct, meaning it's never used in the forwarding. It's just like putting your policy into one place, right? So whenever you create a tenant, whatever the policy you created under that tenant, it will remain into that tenant until unless if you want this policy should be exported into the other tenant, that you can do it. So let's suppose you have a tenant A, you created some policy, right? It will remain into that tenant, but you want tenant B should also consume that policy. So for example, the contract. Now you created this contract under tenant A, you will see this contract under only tenant A, but you want that this contract should also be in the tenant B for some reason. What is that reason? We will discuss. Then you need to export this contract policy from tenant A to tenant B. So, until unless if you don't export it, you won't be able to see that policy under the tenant B. Okay. Now there is one more tenant which is termed as tenant common. The name itself says common. It means if this contract is under tenant common, I will see that same contract into the tenant B. Or that's the right way. Tenant B can use this contract which is created under the tenant common. So some of the policy you don't want to create for every customer. Let's suppose the DNS policy um, or a QS policy, right? Or some contract, right? So you don't want that every customer come and every tenant you want to create that policy. So rather than creating that same policy in every tenant, create that policy into the common contract under the common tenant and use that policy in the other tenant. Okay, so VRF right now, I'm assuming you know the VRF, right? So VRF is a logical construct of it's a virtual routing and forwarding, meaning whatever the routes under one VRF, you won't be able to see into the another VRF until unless you are doing a VRF inter VRF link. Okay, so apart from that, VRF in the ACI does so many things. What are those? We will discuss that. Right now, the BD, bridge domain, right? So bridge domain and the EPG. Okay, so bridge domain, as of now, just think about SVI. Okay, so think BD as a SVI. So if any server, let me clear this mess. So if this is the server, server A. Okay, so I'm saying it's a VLAN number 10. Now I need to assign a gateway 10.1.1.254/24. So let's suppose that's the gateway I've assigned to server number A, or this VLAN number 10, right? So where I will do, I will configure under this BD, bridge domain. So just like in our traditional network, we used to do interface VLAN number 10 IP address 10.1.1.1254/24, right? So as you know, just think about the same thing. Like under the BD, you will configure the SVI 10.1.1.254. Okay. Next thing is EPG. Okay. What is EPG? Okay. So EPG is not, is the endpoint group. It's an endpoint group. What is this endpoint group meaning is? Let me open a new topology diagram. Okay, so this is actually important. Tenant, if you don't know, that's okay. If you don't understand, just let me know. If you don't understand the EPG, whatever we are discussing the EPG. Okay, server A, or I will say server, web server. Web server, right? Web server is attached to E1/1 port on a leaf 102. Now this web server team has some specific requirement. What is that? That the speed should be 100 gig speed. Auto negotiation should be off, and LLDP should be disabled. Okay, and it should be in a VLAN 100, let's suppose. And what else? VLAN 100, and the gateway should be 10.1.1.254/24, and should have internet access. Should be accessible from internet. That's the right word. From internet, right? So how the internet is reachable? You have a one router here, right? This has the internet cloud. So meaning the thing is internet cloud, right? So it means every user can access this web server by this path, right? So that's the requirement of a web server Ethernet 1 by, which is connected only 102 Ethernet 1/1, right? So how you achieve this requirement of the web server? Let's see first of all this, right? Speed, auto negotiation, LLTP, and VLAN 100. It will come under which thing? My access policy, right? Because under access policy, I defined what would be the speed of this port. Auto negotiation should be off and off, and LLDP, right? And VLAN pool. So VLAN pool. Now gateway, I will configure under the BD, right? Under the BD we discuss, right? Under the BD you define this BD. So how you create a BD? Under the tenant policy, right? Under the, you go under the tenant, basically. You go under the tenant, under the networking. That's how you create a BD. So bridge domain, create a bridge domain. You give us some name, test. Okay, so here you see a subnet. You click a plus sign. You say 10.1, 10.1.1.25254. /24. Okay. So you created this BD. Just don't. I know I have skipped so many options in the BD. So if any of you has familiar with the bridge domain or created bridge domain in the past, so you see under optimize, if I see a custom, there are so many options. Definitely this we have to discuss in detail, but what is BD, we will discuss that right first. So under 10, basically what I'm trying to say, if you want to create a BD, under BD you define this gateway, you need to configure under the tenant. So you go under the tenant, under the networking, that's where you create a bridge domain. Okay, so created a bridge domain. Now should be accessible from internet. So for that you apply a contract, right? So you apply a contract between this router, right? So this router here and this server here, you apply a contract. Now that contract, which, right, you apply this contract between this router and this one. Now how you apply a contract, we will see it in detail, but where you will create this contract, again in the tenant, right? So under the tenant, if you go to tenant, I am in a common tenant, see this where you create a contract, right? So that's where you create a contract, standard contract, right? So let's assume you apply this contract between this web server and this router, so that the web server can be accessible from the internet. So internet user can reach to this web server. So this all policy you applied to this web server, right? So you may ask me, just for one server we have to create access policy, tenant policy, and so many things, right? But what is the use of this thing? Now web server team comes to you and say, hey, we need one more server, exactly same server which you have deployed only 102 Ethernet 1x1. We need one more server. Can you give the access? Can you tell us on which port we can connect that server, right? So let's suppose only 102, no port is available. So you tell them, hey, just connect to the leaf 105. Only 105, one of the port is available, so that's where, let's suppose that port is 1/24. That's the port number is connected. So you told them, just connect your web server on that port. Now you don't need to create this access policy again. You don't need to create this tenant policy again. You don't need to create this contract again. What you will do, you will put this E1/24 into the same group as this Ethernet 1x1 port group, right? Why? Because they're the same server. They are the same end device, right? They are the same end device, or we call that group is endpoint group. So meaning of endpoint group is like, whenever I put Ethernet 1x1 into this endpoint group, it will attach all this access policy and all this tenant policy to this group. Now I'm putting E1/24 into the same endpoint group, or in the same EPG. The short form of this endpoint group is nothing but the EPG. So by doing that, E1/24 will have the same policy. It means the speed of this port will be configured 100 gig. Auto negotiation will be automatically off. LLDP will disable. VLAN 100 will be allowed. Gateway, which was pushed on leaf 102. This one 10.1.254/24. That's the gateway which is pushed on leaf 102, will be automatically pushed to the leaf 105. It means this 10.1.1.254/24, this gateway will be, you will see that same gateway only 105. And also the contract, it means this contract which was between this E1/1 port and this router, the same contract will be automatically applied on this port. Why? Because they are part of the same EPG, which is termed as endpoint group, right? So EPG puts them into the same, or I would say EPG apply the same policy to that port as soon as you put that port into that EPG. So what you need to do, you need to put E1 by 24 into this EPG. As soon as you put it, it means all that policy, gateway, contract, this access policy will be applicable to E1 by 24, and you don't need to do it again. You don't need to configure, you don't need to go log into the L104, configure interface, VLAN 10, SVI. No, you don't need to do it. BD will automatically push, the contract will automatically push, all the policy will be automatically pushed. You just need to create one time, which is for Ethernet 1 by 1. Now the similar thing for, let's suppose for another web server asking you, hey, we need a one more port, can you give us, right? So again, the same story, it's not available on leaf 105. If it is available on leaf 106, as soon as you put that port, whatever the port you are choose, let's suppose 1 by 20. Now the same, now what you need to do, you need to put 1 by 20 into the same group. As soon as you put it, the gateway, which is 10.1.1.254, will be pushed to the leaf 106. The contract will be applied, and this web server will be accessible from the internet, right? So endpoint group, the name is endpoint group. It's meaning whatever the server which have the same set of policy, which has the same communication method or everything which is same, I'll put into the one EPG. That's a name. That EPG could be any name, right? So that's the meaning of this EPG. Now, yeah, so is it clear what is the EPG is? Right. So if you want to create a EPG, how you will create a EPG? Let me first create a tenant. I will create a test tenant. Submit. So here, application profile. Right. So under application profile, now first of all, you create an application profile. It means you say a web server. Submit. Now this create application profile. It means here I will put all my web server into this application profile. Now this web server is from, let's suppose this web server which we are talking is from Apache, right? Or from any other vendor. So let's suppose it's from Apache, or it's a test, or it's used by development team. Can't put a space in between, so it's a development team. You select a BD. As of now, I'm selecting any just to show you. And finish. That's how you create a EPG. So under application profile, you create a one EPG, which with the meaning of development team. Right now, okay. So now what we have discussed, let me summarize once again: the tenant, the VRF, the BD, and the EPG. Now EPGs. The tenant, VRF, BD, and EPGs. What is tenant? You just think about tenant is a one file where you put all your configuration or all your policies. So tenant A is that. Now under tenant A is your policy, your VRF, your BD, your EPG, your contract inside that, right? So VRF, virtual routing forwarding. BD is nothing but the SVI, right? And EPG. EPG is your end point group. Okay, so nothing apart from that. You don't need to just worry about that. I know maybe it's you're not able to understand. But just give me some time and it will be clear to all of you what I'm trying to say.